Join us today as we share videos from the Vault, special presentations, past interviews, and share with you the A.R.E. through the ages.
The Search for God program. I'm Gary Bloward, I'm the conference facilitator, and I'd like to welcome you to our presentation today. And to start, let me introduce the speaker that will be giving you some important information on how to change your life. Karen Boldt has been an A.R.E. staff member since 2003. She's rotated through many different departments within this organization, the health center, the massage school, also the youth and family services program. She currently oversees the Search for God program and the prayer and meditation services. A student of the Cayce readings, she really concentrates on the readings, the 262 and the 281 series of readings. 262 is study groups. 281 is the Glad Helpers, the prayer healing group series of readings. Karen has held a daily prayer and meditation devotion for over 17 years. 17 years. And she's also a member of that prayer and healing group, which is named the Glad Helpers. She's also a workshop leader, and of course, an A.R.E. presenter, speaker. A study group member for almost 10 years, she finds ways every day to use the powerful lessons of spiritual law and personal transformation that's found in this Search for God program. Many of the people on the staff here at the A.R.E. wear many hats, and she's no different. And we're very happy that she's a part of this group, a part of this organization, and is doing great work. I've known her as a Glad Helper, and certainly with the study groups. Let's give a warm welcome to Karen Boldt.
Thank you. Good luck. Thanks. Good afternoon. On behalf of the staff, I'd like to say welcome home, even though many of you may be here for the first time. So many of us, when we come to the A.R.E. for the first time, myself included, feel like you have come home. It is a spiritual home. And one of the reasons why it is a spiritual home is because this group of people laid the foundation for us. So we're going to talk a little bit today about the history and the story of study groups. When I first started researching this, I'd like to thank several people. First, Dave McMillan, who has done awesome work with the study group material. Many of you may have taken his online courses, and his DVDs are going to be available in the bookstore. And he was unable to give this talk. He had a scheduling conflict, so I was asked to do it. So I would like to thank him because this has truly been a joy to go to the Vault, to work with Karen Davis at the Edgar Cayce Foundation, and to really flesh out and find out who these people were. Working with the study group department, of course, I knew all of the basics, when it started, who was in the first group, how things progressed, but I really didn't know the personal stories behind, and actually what led up to the forming of the study group. So I thank everyone who has helped me to do this presentation today. So, story of study group. We're going to cover just September through December of 1931. Every time I've been rehearsing this, I've had so much material that I've had to cut back and cut back and cut back. So hopefully I'll have an opportunity to talk to you in greater length about this subject, but for right now we're just going to cover the first 3 months. And they were quite dramatic first 3 months, so I think we have quite a bit to cover. In 1931, Edgar Cayce's life changed with the stroke of a pen. He was sent this letter, excuse me, from the Blumenthals. Just to give you a little bit of background, in 1927, the association was formed, and there was $150,000 was raised to build the hospital. In 1928, the hospital opened, and in 1930, Atlantic University opened. So this was rather a bustling space here. Several things happened. We're not going to get into all of the details, but in February of 1931, the board of directors decided to close the organization, just to shut everything down. And so he received this letter. Dear Edgar, Edwin and I intend to make occasional visits to Virginia Beach during the coming summer months and desire to use the 35th Street house to live in during our visits. Furthermore, we are anxious to prepare the house for sale, under which conditions we must ask you to kindly vacate the premises. We have been very glad to have permitted your residence in the house without payment of any rent to us and without payment on your part of any of the taxes pertaining to the property, but now desire to make other arrangements. He had been given this house, or he had been allowed to live in the house with his family, and was told, he was sent this in June and was asked to vacate the premises by July 1st. Harmon Brough wrote in his dissertation, in 1931, Edgar Cayce is reported by his friends and family to have wanted to die. Even his periods of quiet for Bible reading and prayer, to which he had found again turned after a period of busy extroversion, only appeared to prepare him for the final transition which he felt that he wished to make. According to his family, it was not merely that he was disturbed by the fact that 8 years after he had started out at Dayton, completely without funds, he was again without funds, in the midst of a nationwide depression. But what crushed him was the knowledge that during those 8 years, he had seen his dearest dreams come to realization, only to see them shattered completely. This was a response that he had to one of his friends on what was happening. I'm only human. Humanity is doomed to failure when it trusts its own weak self, and most of us have that failing. I look back over the turmoils and tribulations, the disappointments and periods of despair. In February 1931, the Association of National Investigators Incorporated, through some of its directors, felt it necessary to close the hospital and discontinue the entire program of the organization. I tried to take stock of myself and the work. Even then I wondered, am I all wrong? So they moved directly across the street, which was one of the few places, if you can imagine, in 1931, there weren't a lot of places here that were available to rent all year round. Most of them were summer places, and so the only place that he could find was across from the hospital that he so dearly loved, and he had to watch them turn it into a nightclub. And so during this time, these people, some of these people, gathered round him. And so I was really curious as to how did this group start? Since my department is in charge of starting new study groups, I was really curious as to how it got started. And so after this period, this group of people rallied around him. This was one of them. I'm only going to talk about a couple of people. There were actually 21 that started in the group. And this is Noah and Hannah Miller. This is September 29th, 1940, and they are with, I want to give everybody credit, they are with Esther Wynn. I guess I can point, I've got the little pointer here. This is Noah Miller. He was the tugboat captain, or he was a captain of some sort, I believe he was a tugboat captain. And that's Hannah, his wife. This is Esther Wynn, who was the compiler of the study group material. And this is Pat Bailey, who is occasionally seen in the study group material. And this was taken at the dedication of the A.R.E. offices on September 29th, 1940. So this is a little bit later, but this tells you about the two of them. They actually got involved in the work by filling out one of these applications, which is an application for a reading. So you would get this, you would fill out with your name, and you would ask what kind of reading you wanted. So there was physical, a check physical, which means you were coming back to check on a physical reading. There was a life reading, a check life, a mental and spiritual, and a professional. So those were all the things. Both Noah, and we'll go back to here, Noah got the first reading here, and he got a life reading. And then a few months later, Hannah came and got another life reading. And so that's how they got involved with the work. They got life readings. And around this time, and they actually went back and got life readings for all 4 of their children. And they actually had a very interesting life reading. Hannah was told that one of her children was actually Eric the Red, and that she was his mother in that lifetime and his mother again. So they had some very interesting life readings to begin with. So that was how some of the people got involved. Around this time, he also started giving talks. Everyone around him thought that he really needed to he had given talks at the hospital. He would give them on Sunday afternoons, just about different topics. And so those around him thought that that would be a really good idea for him to start talking again. And also because they had started talking about forming this group, and in his readings, it actually, I think a year beforehand, had started talking about this group was coming and was going to be forming. So they were wanting to get the people interested. And so he started doing, he did several speeches at the Hotel Monticello, which I don't think is in downtown Norfolk anymore. But he would go into downtown Norfolk primarily and give speeches to people. And one of the places where he would give speeches was the Ragged Robin Tea Room. And this is a picture this is actually from Congress. We're trying to tag down exactly, but this is a photo from one of the early Congresses. But I can just imagine that the room would have been filled the same way when he was giving his speeches. So some of the people came from hearing his speeches. They actually got a group charter, and this is the actual study group charter, from the association in July of 1931. So they had gotten the charter and things were developing. They were getting the people together, and they had the charter in July. And then in September of 1931, an appointment was made for a reading for the group. And so this is actually from the appointment book. We've covered up he gave 2 readings in the morning, as he usually did. I think both of them were physical readings. And then you see here, it's hard to see, but right here, it says study group number 1. I think that's what it says. I'm having a hard time reading it from there too. Norfolk study group number 1, questions. So they were asking questions to begin with. And then so for this first study group reading, which is one of the things that the group also did, which I was always thankful for when I tell people this, is that the study group readings went on for 11 years. They had at least one reading, usually one reading a week. And so we have 13 volumes, which we have now available for sale in the bookstore. This is the first volume, and there are 2 other volumes that are about this thick, volume 16 and volume 17, which actually are compilations of all of the actual readings. And then what the group was charged with doing was to take those readings. They were mimeographed. I'm getting ahead of myself, trying to sell the book, but if you're interested in actually doing that. And so then they condensed that down into those 2 books. So I am very grateful to them that I'm not reading this book and going through this book, that they actually, and one of the reasons why they were told that they needed to do that was that they had to have the personal experience. They had to do the application. That's very important in the study group readings. It's not just the knowledge, it's the application. And so each one of them were charged with homework, so to speak, and they were to go and come back once they had finished doing their homework and provide, a lot of times in the study group text, you'll see PE, which is personal experience. So that's a personal experience from one of the members of the group. So they had the first study group meeting here. This is still downtown Norfolk. You can go here and visit. Actually, Kevin Grant said, I know exactly where that is. It's Washington Manor. This is where C.A. and Minnie Barrett resided. And so the first study group was held there. The first in attendance were, Edgar Cayce, of course, Gertrude Cayce, C.A. Barrett, Minnie Barrett, Mrs. A.F. Black, which is very interesting. In the first study group, they're listed as Mrs., and then as they go in, then they start using their names. So they're no longer Mrs., they're using their names, which I thought was interesting. Helen Casey, Mildred Davis, Edith Edmonds, Florence Edmonds, Mrs. F.M. Freeman, Hannah Miller, Mrs. T.P.W. Morrow, Mr. and Mrs. C.W. Rossborough, Helena Story, and Esther Wynn. There were people that came and went from those first meetings. They actually, I wish that we had a copy, and Karen Davis is still searching for one. They actually did posters and ran ads in the newspaper trying to get members for the first study group, which I thought was fascinating, and I'm going to find one of those eventually. And so they had group minutes. They actually had business meetings that they would conduct during the week, and then they would come and get the reading. And then those would be, in some of the minutes that I read, they actually were raising funds for a mimeograph machine, if any of you remember mimeograph machines. So that's the other unbelievable accomplishment. You know, we order a book online, it's delivered Amazon Prime, you know, or we just have it on our tablet. They were having to actually type up the reading, mimeograph it, and then pass it out to the members. And the members had to remember to hold on to that mimeograph sheet, right? And then going back and forth doing that. So this is actually one of the minutes, group minutes that they had. And then they had study materials. These are actually mimeograph copies of the original 262, the first reading. And you can see somebody was underlining, and in some of the books, we actually have Ruth LeNoir's first study group book, the first printed one, and she's got notes all in it. And so we still do that. Those of you who are in study groups, if you've underlined and date and do different things. So it was just really interesting to see that they did the same things too. They gave tithes, just as we asked the study group department to do. And you can see from this one that it was $3 that was given by the Norfolk study group from the secretary treasurer. And this group really became a support for Edgar Cayce as well. This was, and they also new group recruitment. So those of you, when we ask, would you like to start a new group? This is the first group that started in Alabama. And this is from 1932. So before they had even published the A Search for God readings, they were sending material and offering people to start new groups. So that was fascinating to me as well. This is Ruth LeNoir. She had a little bit of a different story, and why I wanted to include her. She actually first heard about Edgar Cayce through, well, she had a premonition to begin with. One of her sisters died in childbirth. And when she was in the hospital, she heard a voice say, if you had known that man in Virginia Beach, your sister would not have died. And later, I think a couple of months later, she actually, her other sister worked in one of the printing houses that did the posters for the study group, and so she heard about him a second time. And this talks about it. I first heard about that man at Virginia Beach from another sister. She was a secretary for a printing firm in Norfolk, and during a conversation she had remarked, "We've been printing things about a man who does something very strange." "What do you mean something strange?" I asked. "What does he do?" She answered, "He goes into a sleep or a trance and can tell you what to do when you are ill." How wonderful, I thought, and wanted to know more about this person. She promised to bring me one of the booklets they were printing. Very interested to know what that booklet was about. And I've got Karen Davis on, looking for it. She kept calling her, all summer she was calling her sister to remind her. And she never got the booklet. She lived in suburban Norfolk, and it was very hard at that time to get down to Virginia Beach. There was a train that came, but you had to have the money, first of all, to take the train. So she kept trying to get down Virginia Beach, and she never did. Besides, I didn't know where the man lived, nor did I even know his name. So she didn't even know Edgar Cayce's name. Strangely, I was to meet him through my sister's death. Her home next door was to be sold, and I dreaded having strangers move in. When the new family arrived in the spring, I couldn't even bear to look in that direction. Consequently, no contact had been made with the family next door when the mother appeared at my entrance one morning. I could hardly believe the words she said to me. I have a daughter who is a patient at the Cayce Hospital in Virginia Beach. Mr. Cayce is that strange person who can tell you when he's asleep what is wrong with you and how to get well. Would you like to drive down with me after lunch today? That's what I have been waiting for all these many weeks, an invitation from someone who knew him and could take me to him. I couldn't get there quickly enough. The lady went first to see her daughter, and this is how I happened to see the Cayce Hospital once before it closed. So she did actually get to see the hospital once before it closed. And she came to the group. It had already been meeting for about 6 months when she ran into Edgar Cayce and Gertrude Cayce at the Ragged Robin Tea Room. And they mentioned to her that the group had started, and they invited her to join. And so she came. She has a very interesting story, and I'll be talking about it in my talk tomorrow about starting a study group, because she came in the middle when it had sort of already gelled. Most of the people who were in place, like I said, they started out a little bit larger group, and then some people came and left. And so she came in sort of in the middle. And she had a hard time sort of figuring out what it was all about. That's what she would say. I don't know what it's all about. She had several dreams about the group and had wanted to ask about them, and was deterred politely by some of the other members from asking the questions, but she persevered. And I'll read a little bit more about her later. But she's always been very important to me because she just knew that she was supposed to be in that group. I think that sometimes when we're joining a study group, perhaps when we're getting there in the middle, or even when we're in the beginning, we're just not sure, is that where we're supposed to be? And she just had this feeling that she knew, and she was meditating and praying, and she was getting answers that yes, you were supposed to be in that group. And so she stayed, and she worked through it, and eventually became, this was actually a picture of herself that she gave to Edgar Cayce for a Christmas present in 1941. So she became very close with the group and with the Cayces. So in December of 1931, they were going along. People were doing their assignments or not doing their assignments. It was sort of a lackadaisical sort of thing. One of the reasons why it took so long, that Ruth said it took so long for them to publish, was because people hadn't turned in their homework assignments. And so they could not publish the first chapter of Cooperation, even though they were working in the 10th chapter or the 12th chapter, until everyone completed their assignment. So that was one of the reasons why it took so long. So as this was going on, Edgar Cayce actually, he wrote a letter to a friend in October of 1931, which is a couple months before this happened. We are starting our 262 and 281 series of readings for the group. The 281 series, I'm sorry, I sort of glossed over that. The 281 series, the first reading for the study group, which was the 262-1, happened on in the middle of September. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the dates right now. And he gave the first reading. He had a dream that night that told him that that wasn't the complete work, that there were actually 7 members of the study group that he was working with that were to do extra study on healing. And so that became known as the prayer group, and then the Glad Helpers prayer group. And so what they would do is they would come, they would have a reading, they would have a little bit of discussion, they would take a break, and then the Glad Helpers would meet for about 15 to 30 minutes at the end. So it was really sort of a seamless sort of a group, and they were all sort of working on their own things. So he's saying to a friend, this is Edgar Cayce, we are starting our 262 and 281 series of readings for the groups, a work that I think has been very sadly neglected. It is only recently that we have been able to get enough of those who I believe have the right feeling about it to combine their efforts. This is the spiritual healing group composed of a very good circle. They haven't begun their actual work yet, but we hope to have a meeting next week, which will start the work on its way. So they're continuing to meet. And Edgar Cayce is getting personal readings that are telling him he's having some physical problems, and they're just some readings that are going on. He's having, again, some prophetic dreams. He has a dream about, we'll talk about this right now. He has a dream. This is in December. Please interpret the following dream had by Edgar Cayce Saturday morning, December 12th, in which he was in meditation with this group. He heard a voice calling, but was prevented from answering by the group. Answer. As has been indicated, that there are needs in the spiritual and the material world for the efforts of this entity, and that there must needs be those activities in the one or the other for the concentration of the actions of the entity. Where the need is most, there the body, there the activities of the entity will be. There is the stage of transformation coming then to the entity. Will this be held in the material plane or in spirit? And the actions depend upon the group, as was seen. As with most Cayce readings, it's a little wordy and it took me a couple of times, but basically what it's saying is he can either stay or he can go. He has work here to do on this physical plane, but he has work that he can do in the spiritual plane as well. And it's up to you all in this group as to what happens. Can you imagine? And so this is their response. What can we as individuals and as a group do to aid in expressing that which will create the force necessary to counterbalance the call from the other side? And the answer? Work. And they go on later in this reading, and each one of them asks, what is it that I can do? And that's really what I love about this group of people, and what I admire about them, and what I admire about all of you, myself included, who are doing this work, who are in study groups, is it's about the try. The righteousness is in the try. These people came back week after week after week. And Harmon Broe, in his dissertation, if you've never read it, it's fascinating. They have a couple copies up in the office. And he said, there would be some times when people would be offered a reading and they would refuse. Can you imagine that? They would say, oh, I'm sure I'll get something from someone else's reading. And if you go back and you really look, and I really do encourage you, if you only get one of the books, you get this first one, which is the volume 7, which covers most of the book 1. Because he calls out several of the group members and tells them, you're not doing your work. So I can imagine why, if you hadn't done your homework, you really probably didn't want to get a personal reading. But they went back. Yeah, I know I would be one of those. But they went back week after week after week, and they did their homework, and they asked more questions. And they were always asking, almost always, how can I be of service to this man, to this group, to this work, to this world? And so, in December of 1931, this group of people pulled up their bootstraps and decided that they were going to keep Edgar Cayce here and let him continue the work that he had done here. As they got into a lot of the readings, particularly with the 281 series, which is the prayer group series, they were told that this group had actually been in several lifetimes together, that they had done this work before, and that they were merely coming together again to complete it. They had been together. Many of you are familiar with the Egypt readings and Ra-Ta. They had been together with him when he was Ra-Ta, and had actually, if you know the story, I briefly can tell you, I'm not an expert in the Egypt readings, but Ra-Ta went away and then came back, and this group of people rallied around him, and he prayed and meditated and restored and rejuvenated his body and his mind and his spirit, and then went on to do the Temple Beautiful and the other temples in Egypt. There was a group of them, and so Hannah Miller and Ruth LeNoir were in that incarnation with Rata. They were also, many of the group members were in incarnation with the Master Jesus. Many of the prayer group, Ruth LeNoir was there, and Hannah Miller actually baked bread for Jesus. And my mic just went off. She baked bread for the study group members. And Hugh Lynn used to say that that was his lesson in patience, because he would take home this freshly baked loaf of bread, and for many, many weeks he could not get home without eating the entire loaf of bread. And so he said he learned many spiritual lessons from that loaf of bread. So they all had come together with Edgar Cayce before in times of trials, in times of turmoil and tribulation, and had come together as a group and surrounded him and had prayed with him and worked with him. And so this too is from Harmon's, his dissertation. After the collapse of the hospital and university and the recovery of his own spiritual poise, Cayce had a profound spiritual impact to many who knew him and his story well. It was not surprising that although they had witnessed his mistakes and discouragement, they rallied around him and helped him to set his whole work in a new direction, a direction clearly spiritual, with his charisma dominant. Cayce responded to that challenge and took up his work again, winning friends on entirely different grounds than before. As a teacher of religious truths, as a counselor who could perceive a man's soul in its naked status before God, as a guide in spiritual practices for humble people, housewives, naval officers, businessmen, teachers, who were drawn to him largely in Tidewater, Virginia, through the closing decade and a half of his life. So this study group was really a rallying point for him. I did have, but I realized I didn't get into this last version of the slide, actually a Western Union that they had sent to him when he was arrested up in New York, and they sent him. Let me see if I can find it here so that I can read it to you before we close. And then we'll close with something from Hannah. From that doesn't really matter. And so in and this is all of their signatures. A Search for God was printed in 1941. So about 10 years after they first started, the first edition was printed. They have this in the vault, and it's actually signed by all the original members of the study group. And then in the end, they added, there's a little note, let me see if I can read it. There are 2 names that were added at the end in 1950. And the group voted on these 2 people and thought that they should be added to replace, that's what the note there is down at the bottom, that they should replace Edgar Cayce and Gertrude Cayce as members of the original group. So they signed there as well. And so what does that mean for us? Oops, we'll go back to the original slide. For me, it comes back to that question, what can we do? We can work. Ruth LeNoir talked a lot about how it was hard, that it wasn't easy, that the work that they did. Here's what she said about that. Sometimes, and I totally resonate with this, sometimes, as the reading said, we were just lax. Often we did not understand the meaning of a reading or just how to begin to apply it. But when we were chided, we tried a little harder. I'm sure those lessons appeal to so many people because so many of us did contribute a thought or an experience. We were all different. The part each contributed speaks to that kind of person today. The readings were right. Each contribution is the hope of the lessons becoming the light to many in many a land. The growth of the mustard seeds of those two groups has come to have a worldwide influence, from Virginia Beach to California, Alaska and Hawaii, on around the world to India and Germany, and even within the walls of prisons. We do have some study groups that are starting, thanks to Judith Stevens, who's now back with our prison program. So we do actually have study groups within the prison system as well. So I hope that, that this has given you a little bit more of an insight into those people that first started. What I'd like to do is take just a few minutes for us to take a few minutes of quiet and for us to honor those people who were those first lights here in Virginia Beach, and to also sort of come together as a group as we start the conference together. I'm so grateful that you all are here, and I'm so excited about the topic because there are so many of us who have been touched by what they called the work, by the study group material. And I know that there are so many of you that have been as well. And it has been a wish fulfilled to have this conference happen. And so I thank all of you who have made that possible, to the donors who have made the scholarships and things possible, and for the reprinting of the booklets and this original material that we have. I'd like to thank all of them and all of you for being here. And I'd also, as we close and we focus on those lights as they first started, that we realize that we too are lights, that we too are here to shine, and that we here are also beacons for those who will come after us. So we're going to dim the lights just a little bit, and we're going to take just a few minutes together in silence. I'll bring you out of it with a short prayer, and then we'll have questions if you have any. Mother, Father God, we thank you for your presence here today in and among us. And we'd like to take just a few minutes of silence to honor those who came before us, the study group members who we know about, who we've read about, and for those who we do not know of, those who came for maybe just 1 or 2 meetings, but who each contributed something of themselves to this work. As we come out of the silence, we thank you for all that has been given and all that has been received. And we're thankful for this group of people who came before us, who provided us with this material, so that we can truly know ourselves, to be ourselves, and yet one with thee. May we continue to be beacons of light for all those that seek your face. Amen. So, before we answer questions, I'd just again like to say that if any of you are interested in starting a study group, if you're already in a study group. We have many different talks here this weekend about different ways that we can assist you, and we'd love to hear from you on ways that you feel that we could improve. And I, again, thank you for coming. I hope that you enjoy your time here and that you're able to really get to know this material and get to know others in study groups. If you're not a member of a study group, or if you are a member of a study group, it's always nice to be able to meet others who may be across the country and sort of connect with them. Are there any questions that anyone has? Let's get, because we might still be taping, so we might want to get a mic just to make sure that everybody can hear your question. So we might need a second just to do that. No? Maybe we'll just, you want to go ahead with your question until we get a mic?
Sure.
I can repeat it after you if we can't hear it.
I wanted clarification on the book and the 2 other books that you mentioned.
Yes. So the 262 series of readings actually occurred over that 10-year period. They are housed in 3 different volumes. Some of you may remember this as the library series. It was a hardback version. I think there were 20 volumes in it that basically were compilations of different topics. And so the prayer group had a series of readings. The study group has a series of readings. There's a series of readings on Egypt and on different things, on dreams. And then there's one on meditation. The prayer group covers mostly group meditation, and then there's another one about individual meditation. And this is everything that was just given in the reading. So any question that was asked, any answer that was given. And then they took this material and they edited it. Esther Wynn was an English teacher, I believe, and so she was the editor. And so they would come together after they had, say, cooperation. They'd gotten all the chapter together. They'd had all the readings that they were going to have on cooperation. They had done their experiments. They would come back, and then they would put all of that together, and then they would have another reading to confirm that that chapter was correct. Because as they were going through, the source was telling them that they did want to eventually encapsulate this and get it out to the masses. And so they were working on that as they were going through the readings. And so that's what we now know are as the 24 chapters of A Search for God, Book 1 and Book 2, are taken from these. There is this volume, and then there are 2 other volumes, volumes 16 and 17, which are about twice the size of this. One of them is about twice the size of this. So if you're interested, if you've never studied, this might be a little difficult if you've never even approached the A Search for God material, but it's very interesting if you just want to sort of look at it. If you want an overview, I would definitely go with the A Search for God, Book 1 and Book 2. If you've been studying those for a long time, and that was one of the reasons why we wanted to get the material out there, it's excellent for groups that have been meeting for a long time, who have gone over the material, sometimes 5, 6, 7 times. And our study group actually uses this as a reference. So if we're going through the Search for God material and there's something, because sometimes they'll say C262-31, and so we'll go back and we'll read the overview. So it's a really great resource and reference to work with the study group material as well. Did that answer your question?
And those are available.
And yes, so the 3 volumes are available. We have volume 7, which I think covers the first 10 chapters. It's either the first, Laura, so I know it doesn't. I've got it right here. So volume 7 covers, I'll tell you right now what it covers, cooperation, and it goes through God, love, man. So there's actually quite a bit in this first volume 7. And so it covers the first 24. Laura, you want to? She's going to save me because she.
If you come to my presentation on Saturday afternoon, you'll hear more about this. Okay. So I have looked at them in depth. The volume 7 is the 262 readings themselves, all of them, the whole 10 years. Volume 16 is book 1 of The Search for God, the paraphrased book 1 that was created plus a whole lot of other readings that people got in their life readings, in their regular readings, that relate to that subject matter in that section of the Search for God chapter, whatever chapter it's in. It's fascinating. You get a lot more depth. And so volume 16 is book 1. Volume 17, they took book 2 of Search for God, and they did the same thing. You get the section that was paraphrased, then you get all these other readings that were given to other people outside of study groups and cover the same material. It's fascinating.
And we also, just to put some more plugs for the books, those of you who have used the Mark Thurston experiment books that were keyed for book 1 and book 2, we have now combined them into one book. So now you'll be able to buy one book that will cover book 1 and book 2. We also have the original prayer group readings available in a volume, so if you're interested in studying that. And they, of course, were, and it refers back and forth a lot to the 262 readings because the prayer group was encapsulated within that first original study group. So that sort of gives you, and it also talks a lot about group meditation and group prayer, which is directly related to the study group material. So there's a lot of information there. There was somebody else that had a question. We had somebody up here. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did that answer it? I would definitely, and I'm sure that Mark Thurston's going to be speaking tomorrow, so you can ask him some questions about that, how that was developed. But I think that, and Judith is back here, so she was here when those books were, she was with the study group department when those books came out, so she could probably talk more about that too.
What I was going to say is that Gladys told us in our study group that when the Search for God readings were being given, that they began to notice that all the life readings given around the same time began to have the themes of the Search for God. And it was almost magical that the people getting the life readings, health readings, anything, suddenly the Search for God was cropping up. Mm-hmm. And those are the excerpts that Laura's talking about that were included in the expanded A Search for God, which are the chunky versions, volume 16 and volume 17, that I'll have for you to see tonight.
Okay. And are available for purchase in the bookstore. Have I said that too many times? Okay, we've got somebody in the back.
So I'm curious, how did they come up with the name of the study group? How did they come up with the name Search for God?
There have been several different, if somebody has a better explanation, because there are several different strains that have gone around. I have heard that it comes from, and I don't know if it's a reading quote or not, but that it came from man's search for truth is a search for God. Something to that effect. And so it sort of got shortened down to A Search for God. And Hewlin was always very adamant that you put that A in front of it, because it is A Search for God, not the search. Because again, when you get into this material, you find out again and again and again how important it is that you take it into your own life and that you use it in, and how it applies to you, because it's going to apply differently to you, than to you, than to you, than to you. And so that's why it's very important that this is a search for God. So that was where I was told that it came from. I've tried to do a little bit of research on that and have never really been able to find anything definitive in terms of where the name came from. Is there anybody else that's heard a different story that would like to add on? Are there any other questions? No? Well, thank you all for coming. As usual, I talk really fast, and so I have sped through my presentation yet again. If you all, in your packets, you all should have received a little half sheet about study groups. If you're not in a study group, it should be personalized. It has your name on it. You should have been handed it to you when you got your packet. If you open it up, there will be study group information on the left-hand side. If there is a study group within I think we did a 60-mile radius. For some people that might be too, yes, right there. Can I hold yours up so that everybody can see it? In your packets, we've started, pardon? They should have, okay, they should have been
Hello, this is John Van Auken, the director of the Edgar Cayce Foundation, and I'd like to share with you some of the really helpful insights that Edgar Cayce was able to channel from the universal consciousness. He could attune his mind to a collective mind in which all existed, including the Akashic record, or what we in the West call the Book of Life. And he addressed many topics that are beneficial to us: reincarnation and karma related to our soul life, holistic health, body, mind, and spirit, prayer and meditation, how important they are to raising our vibrations and expanding our mind, um, developing our intuition and understanding our dreams and having a more dynamic dream relationship with our subconscious mind. So then the sub and the conscious are working together more and communicating. Yes, the language of the subconscious is different than ours, and dreams are often difficult to understand, but Edgar Cayce helps us with this. In this talk today, I would like to address that very thing. Dreams are processes that are affected by our physical organism, chemistry, electrical patterns, chemistry, emotions, attitudes, even things that our mind has been focused on, especially just before bed and all, can affect the dream state. But if we shift to where we're seeking understanding, enlightenment, information through the dream source, which is our deeper subconscious mind, then we can start to develop a dream study pattern with ourselves. And we start to get our subconscious's perspective. Edgar liked to say, he broke the word correlate into correlate, that the subconscious can correlate to what's going on in the conscious life. And those patterns of correlation actually give us insights into what's going on. Also, Cayce said the subconscious is not limited by time and space, so we can actually have a precognitive dream. In other words, our subconscious already perceives a pattern that's going to lead to a future event, a future relationship, a future challenge, or a future opportunity. And it can convey that to us. That's how important it is to build this cooperating relationship. Okay, here are some keys. First, how to remember your dreams and how to generate dreams. As you are falling asleep, give yourself a pre-sleep suggestion. That suggestion can be something like this: now I'm going to sleep soundly, deeply, and wake up feeling refreshed, revitalized, and remembering my dreams. And remembering my dreams. This is kind of a self-hypnotic suggestion. So you say it over and over. Now I'm going to sleep deeply, soundly, wake up feeling refreshed, revitalized, and remembering my dreams. That's a pre-sleep suggestion. Then as you're waking in the morning or whenever during the night you start to waken, don't jump so quickly out into the outer self, and don't move the body right away. Linger a moment and capture what's going on in the mind, and then feed it thoroughly to the outer self. The dream did not happen in the outer mind, it happened in the subconscious. Therefore, you need the sub to convey its perspective to the outer mind, rather than have the outer mind attempt to interpret the subconscious language, which is usually imagery, symbolism, dramatic scenes and scenarios and conversations and all, while you're in the subconscious and seeing the dream and processing it, feel the meaning. Cayce said the best interpreter of the dream is the dreamer, and the dreamer is your subconscious self, not your outer conscious intellectual self. Try to get a feel for the meaning, convey all of this out to the outer self, and then you really will build a dream journal that will help you a great deal in your relationships out here, knowing people better by knowing their souls, patterns, and thoughts, knowing yourself better by knowing the depths of your habit patterns and qualities of your nature that your subconscious sees clearly and will share with you. Also, the opportunity to have foresight. Foresight's very helpful in life. So precognitive dreams are very helpful. They can spot opportunities and they can spot karmic challenges that are coming or are right upon you, or you might be in the midst of one and you need your subconscious to help you. These are all very important. If you would like to learn more about this, please go to edgarcayce.org/join, and you'll be able to enter the membership part of our huge website and get all sorts of information, much more depth about dreams and visions, as well as intuition, holistic health, and all the other topics that Cayce covered. Okay, bye-bye.
I'm Jessica Newell, archivist for the Edgar Cayce Foundation. We're on the corner of 67th Street and Atlantic Avenue, looking at the front facade of the A.R.E. Library and Conference Center, also known as the A.R.E. Visitor Center. The building opened to the public in 1975, but the journey to build it started years earlier. In the early 1960s, it became apparent that the A.R.E. was running out of space in the Cayce Hospital building, which it had moved to fairly recently in 1956. The library's book collection had already outgrown the space, with hundreds of books now having to be stored in the basement. Staff offices were getting cramped despite the addition of the Wynn Press building to campus in 1962. The Cayce Hospital's structural integrity was in question. The pipes were rotting in the walls, wrote Hewlin Cayce in a letter. Staff formed a building committee to look at their options. Levitt Associates of Norfolk submitted a proposal in 1966 for design made of circles and curvilinear shapes, covered in white stucco and plaster. According to the architects, quote, by its plastic form, the design of the building suggests the flexibility that man must possess in his pursuit of enlightenment. The largest circle is reserved for the library. Offices and study rooms line the outer circumference, with the center a patio court surrounded by transparent glass. The architects wrote that the clarity of the structural form of the library suggests truthfulness. The meditation room is connected to the library with a helical wall symbolizing life. The architects located it next to the library so that it takes on a conscious and subconscious relationship with the very source of the energy through which we serve those who come seeking in this place. Entering the meditation room, the floor slopes gently upward. Moving further into the space, the ceiling also rises, reaching the seating area where the ceiling has doubled its original height. There are no windows but a shaft of light, sunlight by day, electric illumination at night, beaming down through a skylight at the center core. This light illuminates the curved wall of the meditation room in a graded manner, rather dimly at the entry, but more brightly toward the center of the room. As the visitor meditates, they will not see the light source, but only that it originates from somewhere above. Another interesting component of the design was a 10 to 15-story high-rise, just behind the proposed library, to house an adult education center for about 200 students and 20 to 25 faculty. It would not have been part of the original construction phase, but a future investment when needed. The A.R.E. approached the Spector, Peak & Howell architectural firm in 1971. Based in Falls Church, Virginia since the 1950s, SPH had designed municipal and government structures such as the Prince William County Library in 1971, Fort Hunt Elementary School in 1969, and underground storage structures for Nike and Hercules missiles. A.R.E. approved the final plan for the Library Conference Center in 1972. It is a concrete and steel structure designed in the Brutalist style. Brutalism was an architectural movement developing in Europe after the Second World War. Buildings in this structure are characterized by basic geometric forms, showcasing the construction material's natural finishes without any extraneous decoration. Brutalism, its name derived from the French term for raw concrete, béton brut, became popular during the rebuilding of the cities of Europe that had been heavily bombed during the war. Notable examples include Unité d'Habitation, designed by the architect Le Corbusier in 1949 for the city of Marseille, and Boston City Hall, designed by Gerhard Kallman and Michael McKinnell in 1962. Construction on the library began in 1973. The structure's steel beams were fabricated in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. The distinctive angled base of the building was constructed using interlocking slabs of concrete, stabilized with earth from the site. The concrete exterior is covered with a fine stone finish of small pebbles to blend in with the sands of the beach across the street. The bronze metals surrounding the windows and the coating on the window panes are designed to withstand the sea air. In a letter to an A.R.E. member, Edgar Cayce described the symbolism of the design in this way. The square structure is representative of man and the earth, materiality, where we are right now. There's a meditation penthouse on top, symbolizing man's spiritual aspirations. A meditation garden will overlook the Atlantic, and you know the symbology of the garden and water. There are 7 steps leading to the entrance. The solidity of the building represents the permanence and security of the knowledge contained in the readings. Gladys Davis and Robert Adriance chose the text for the lintel above the front entrance, that we may make manifest the love of God and man. A.R.E. staff and the local community dedicated the completed Library Conference Center on Sunday, March 30th, 1975. Entering the front doors, we see the bookstore on the right and the auditorium straight ahead. There's both a main auditorium for events as well as a mini auditorium to host smaller audiences. There are long horizontal windows along the top edges of the walls in these rooms to let in sunlight as well as providing a glare-free environment for projected presentations. Moving up the center staircase, we see the large bronze chandelier designed and built for the space by George Loxo. Loxo was a Finnish-American sculptor who started exhibiting his work professionally in 1955. According to a review in the Norfolk Ledger-Star, he was represented by the Studio Gallery in Virginia Beach and the President Chrysler Museum in Norfolk. Loxo was adept at carving in wood and stone, metal casting, aluminum and bronze, and he also created welded sculptural pieces like this chandelier. To the right of the double doors leading to the second floor stands a sculpture by Funchen Lord. Born in St. Louis in 1911, Lord graduated from Radcliffe College and Washington University in St. Louis. She painted more than 270 abstract expressionist, op art, and minimalist pieces, and also worked in folded metal to create paintings and sculptures, like this piece, which was donated to the A.R.E. by her husband William Lord after her passing in 1993. A member of the Florida Artists Group and the Royal Society of Arts, she described her work as the secret inner life of the personality, confronted by the conflictual nature of living and by the vast area of the unconscious mind. Her pieces represent psychic coldness and are extensions of the self expressed in energy. Immediately in front of us hangs the Edgar Cayce Aura chart, painted by Ingo Swann from 1967 to 1969 and donated to the A.R.E. by the artist estate. Swann was known for research on psychic and remote viewing phenomena. This painting is based on Edgar Cayce's past lifetimes, visually described in a series of psychic readings. Swann described the piece as the nucleus of a transpersonal art form. Miriam Sommerberg carved Reincarnation in 1949 and donated it to the A.R.E. in 1980. A sculptor who also worked in oils, watercolors, and woodcut prints, She attended the Bauhaus in 1926 and fled Germany with her 5 children during the Second World War. They made it through Italy to Naples, where they joined 976 other refugees on board the USS Henry Gibbons en route to a shelter at Port Ontario, New York. Sommerberg continued her successful work as an artist and exhibited internationally throughout her career. She wrote in the journal Design in 1950 that, quote, "Art doesn't belong on a pedestal. It belongs to the ordinary people and should be treated honestly." Let's make our way up to the 3rd floor to the meditation penthouse, as the architects called it. A curved entrance hall, reminiscent of that 1966 design by Levitt & Associates, leads into a wide rectangular room oriented toward an enormous window, with an incredible view of the Atlantic Ocean. The patio is inaccessible now, but original plans described a rooftop garden and a geometric open roof above. Frederica Fields designed and constructed the stained glass windows throughout the meditation floor. Born in Philadelphia in 1912, she attended Wellesley College and became an abstract stained glass artist. Some of her pieces are preserved at the Corning Museum of Glass in Corning, New York. In an A.R.E. News interview in 1977, Fields described her work like this: "Forget the look of leaded lights in a Gothic church. Think no more of figure or story rendered in flat pictorial glass. Free the mind from the traditional stained glass techniques and all thought of modern plastic involvements. We are dealing with an abstract construction in pure glass, truly three-dimensional, involving color, which represents a new visual experience. Light journeys through the layers and intermingling shapes, retaining the purity of color and the sparkle inherent in the glass itself. The source of illumination is fractured and dispersed so that the work is alive throughout." Behind the building grows the meditation garden. The garden was part of the original 1975 campus design, with small ponds and plentiful seating throughout the foliage. The plantings were restored and updated in 1994. The garden serves as a haven and gathering place for staff and visitors, as well as a wedding venue. The A.R.E. Library and Conference Center is a unique example of modernist architecture amidst the more traditional architectural styles of the Virginia Beach oceanfront, reflecting both the era in which it was built and the organization that calls it home.
It is my privilege to introduce our guest speaker, one of A.R.E.'s most popular speakers, one of A.R.E.'s most popular writers, truly a renaissance man for the organization, John Van Auken. Come on down.
So we're going to take a little journey through some current and recent news and into the realm of what can we as individuals do to help. And I think you're going to be, some of you, surprised, and others of you are going to say, "Oh, I forgot about that." How to save the world, mounting evidence that our inner resources, for our inner resources, but we forget so quickly. Way back, BC, Heraclitus was the first one who really observed this reality, this world we live in, and that the only constant in this world is change. And the Edgar Cayce readings are not so much trying to stop the change, but rather to influence the direction of change, because change is going to happen in this world. That is the main factor, the constant. And to help our fellow human beings adjust to the changes. So that's kind of what we're going to look at. I love little side things. See, I've been working to closely with Alison Hedrick for too long. So these comedy things jump in. It's uncontrollable. This is to show you the influence of Heraclitus, which many of us don't know about, but really he influences so much today. One of his favorite comments was, "You can't step into the same river twice." And you think about the flow of the river. So one of the gals at the university put this together, and you can't step into the same shower twice. So things are moving all the time in your life, things within you and things around you. I ask this question because often there are aspects to change that we don't like, that upset us, make us uncomfortable. We would like the status quo. It gives us a sense of peace. But really, it would be helpful if we had an awareness that everything is in motion, the river is flowing, and it will not be the same twice. And that will help you a little bit as you watch world affairs go by. So save the world from what? And we begin the two main factors, and I love this editorial cartoon here showing nature on one side and man on the other, and man yelling to nature, "Hey, we don't need your help in creating disasters. We're pretty good at it ourselves." And here's a list of all the stuff that's just spinning around the news media that just breaks your heart or makes you just wonder why it's all so crazy. And I haven't even listed, I could have gone on with this list of what's been going on in the last couple of years. Now, see, Allison's influenced me again here. Some of the problems that we forget about, but that a lot of human beings in different organizations are working on all the time, are dirty water around the world, contaminated water. And as you can see here, the Natural Resources Defense Council is actually saying that is the greatest health risk on the planet right now. Then the next one that we really forget about a lot, though back in the 60s and 70s it was a big news item, is that we're losing the topsoil of the planet. Back in the 1500s, we had topsoil on the planet Earth of 18 inches deep. And now it's down to 8 inches. So something has to be done to rebuild. And if you were with us back in the 60s, I know some of you weren't even born yet, but Mother Earth catalog and things like that, we were always composting, right, to bring back the topsoil. And I had a little compost pin for doing my job with Organic Gardening magazine and that organization. The other thing is temperature change. And here again you see the EPA pointing out that by 2100 the temperature is going to go up 4 to 11 degrees depending on our policies, on what man does. So here you have man and nature again wrestling with the conditions of the planet. The National Resources Defense Council says the average temperatures in the Arctic region are actually rising twice as fast as they are around the most inhabited parts of the world. And Arctic ice is getting thinner, melting, and rupturing. For example, the largest block of ice in the Arctic, the Ward Hunt Ice Shelf, has been around for 3,000 years before it started cracking in the year 2000. Within 2 years of that, it had split all the way through and is now breaking into pieces. The loss of this ice adds to the temperature of the planet. So things are moving and changing all the time. Edgar Cayce actually predicted a lot of events related to climate change and conditions in the planet. And some of the activities that have been going on unnoticed. And so I thought I'd bring those up and share them with you. First off, he had a fantastic reading about our sun and how the sun's really going to affect us a great deal, and then shockingly blames it on us. It's not a cosmic event.
It's human attitudes and emotions. Now, when I first read this, I was in my 20s, and I went, you're telling me that my attitude is affecting sunspots on that enormous star? It was just like mind-breaking to try to think of that. But then he also points out we have relationships to the universe. We actually affect the universe. The greater your ability to help and to aid, the greater your ability to rely upon the God force within you. Now, here goes another paradox. So you're not saying, I can do something about this out here unless I start doing something about it in here. I connect somehow in here. It's a great paradox, especially to a three-dimensional mind. You really have to break through to an awareness that is fourth dimensional, that somehow within you energies influence the energies of the whole. That your very thought, your very emotion is affecting a collective, and that people add to the collective these emotions, and somehow nature reacts. And then he points out we have a responsibility. I thought I was just in this life to enjoy it, experience it, and do the best I can. You're telling me I am my brother's keeper? You know, that adds another little dynamic from Edgar to our soul self. And then he says the sun reflects these turmoils, and that it's a natural consequence of turmoils, these solar events. So what we haven't been paying attention to, but I'm always searching for, is that major solar events occur and they just go right on by. And we just keep on living without an awareness that we're in an environment bigger than just our little town, our little yard. And I mean, recently the scientists didn't even tell us that a meteorite passed between the moon and the earth. That's how close it was, because they didn't want to upset us. And things are going on that we should be aware of. July 23rd of 2012, remember last year was the Mayan calendar event. Our sun not only burst forth with another solar flare, but it followed that with a colossal coronal mass ejection. CMEs, you're going to see them called. The scientists explain the events this way. A solar flare is initiated by the sudden release of energy stored in the sun's corona, causing the sun's plasma to heat up to tens of millions of degrees, accelerating and kicking out all sorts of radiation, and often creating a solar prominence or filament eruption. In a large solar storm, the same energy from the corona can also cause a coronal mass ejection, CME, a much slower moving billion-ton cloud of plasma, electrons and protons. They followed this explanation with this, quote, Earth was almost knocked back to the Stone Age on July 23rd last year. I didn't see that in any headline at all, nowhere. The sun kicked out one of the largest solar flares and CMEs ever recorded, and it missed Earth by a whisker. One of the lead researchers, Daniel Baker, if it had hit, we'd still be picking up the pieces. Now, believe it or not, Heraclitus is still in there saying the sun is new each day. It's always changing its energy and moving around. Another thing you need to know is that the solar radiation does come to the Earth all the time. Sometimes it comes in more intensity, and we see this as the polar lights. And I got to put the mic down. We have a Van Allen belt around the planet that shields us and directs the radiation to the poles. And that's why we see the northern and southern lights. Now, this solar storm actually occurred in 1859, and it destroyed all of the Victorian telegraph network in Europe and North America. If it had hit us today, it would have been devastating. All flights would have been canceled, and there are lots of flights going on around the planet. If a giant solar storm hit the Earth, large parts of society will be without power for months or years. It isn't all bad, though, because you'd get to see these pretty lights all over the planet. So it'd be very lovely. Here's the Van Allen belts, and here's our shield, an electromagnetic field. But here's what the scientist on PBS's NOVA program, the magnetic storm, this was way back in 2004, but it went right through our minds, and nobody really paid a lot of attention to it. But I went in and sent for the video of the show from NOVA, and they sent it to me. Basically, what they're saying is the Van Allen belts are breaking down. Let's see, where's that one guy? Peter Olson from Johns Hopkins says, the Earth's magnetic field has been our protector for millennia, and now it appears it is about to go away. But it goes away just temporarily as the electromagnetic poles shift, the Van Allen belts break down and rotate. Now, pilots of airplanes know this, so their compasses and all and their maps have to be updated all the time because magnetic north is moving all the time and has moved a great deal. But the Van Allen belts break down as they reorient, and some of this radiation is going to reach the Earth, and you will see the northern lights in more unusual places around the equator and all. Edgar Cayce actually talked about some of this, that there are gradual changes, there is solar activity going through cycles. And then this is a gradual, not a cataclysmic activity in the experience of the Earth in this period, but it is a change. And surprisingly, he blames the change on rising emotions and attitudes among human beings, affecting the collective, which affects the physical manifested sun and the energies around the planet. Here's a couple of more things to know. The North Pole has already melted. Now, every year, the Russian icebreaker used to go and mark the North Pole for the axis, not the north magnetic field, but the axis. And then they, back in early 2000s, they went and there was no ice. It was open sea. So it was very hard for them to mark the North Pole. And since then, the melting has continued, and it's particularly difficult for oil rigs up there and shipping. And now Canada has always been responsible for the northern shipping passageway, and they're all freaked out because there's floating ice everywhere, and it's much more difficult to pass. And some of these waves are 16 feet high north of Alaska due to no polar ice to hold things steady. So there's a big flux going on. Just in the news last couple of weeks ago, Toledo, Ohio had to suspend all use of its water, tap water. You could not bathe in it because it would burn your skin, and you could not drink it. And it's because the Great Lakes are starting to have toxic blooms occur, and so that water is being affected poisonously, and that'll take a lot of work to correct. Again, that one is influenced by temperature. So, how do we save the world? Well, believe it or not, we can. Clearly, Cayce taught us that we can indeed help and aid the light forces subdue the influences of the dark forces. Now, don't go looking outside yourself for these. Yeah, okay. How? How can we little individuals, as individuals and groups, affect a change in the world? We forget so quickly and easily. Proof is offered to us over and over and over, but we forget as the world overwhelms us and we keep going. So let's look at some of this and try again to keep it in our minds. First off, how many of you were around in 1994? And many of you, come on, some of you aren't that young. Do you remember this? This guy had absolute hard proof that the vibrations of attitude or spoken word or thought patterns as water was freezing created crystals that looked beautiful, or these, absolutely deformed. There was hard evidence of attitudes and emotions, words and thoughts. Solid evidence. It made the New York Times bestseller list. It was a hit. He wrote 3 more books after it. But we just forget. We just keep on flowing. But you got to keep in mind that our thoughts and words affect outcomes. Now, Edgar Cayce says they affect your very self. What you keep thinking affects you. And if you keep judging yourself or putting yourself down or thinking about your weaknesses and never your virtues, you are affecting yourself negatively. Now, how about in your marriage? Doris and I tried this. We lasted a couple of weeks, but we were only supposed to think positive about each other. Because Edgar talked about that in the readings, you know. But about 2 weeks into it, we were going, you're thinking bad things about me. Yeah, well, I'm trying not to. But it's very hard. This really influences us. Like in our relationships here at A.R.E., I have been through some of the dark periods of very negative relationships. And thank God we're going through this wonderful period of light and love and positive energy. The board meetings are just terrific. This brings light and love to the whole organization, to everybody. When we were all factionalized and fighting and critical of one another, the negativity was so heavy, and we didn't expand, we didn't grow, we just had this tension all the time. These are absolute facts proven by simply using water crystals. I will point out that Emoto felt that Katrina and other tsunamis and cyclones and hurricanes and all those things that had to do with water, he felt that it was the growing violence on the planet, the growing negative energy and the hatred among different people was causing nature to react, and nature ceased to react. And he came out in the press much later in the early 2000s with all of this. Even with Katrina, he came out and spoke about it. And I think there's something to that. Of course, we're all learning the power of prayer, and Edgar Cayce was a big proponent of that. And we forget here's just 3 major studies to show you how bizarre prayer is in impacting people. And I'm going to start with the bottom one, because the people being prayed for didn't even know they were being prayed for. That's how impactful your prayers are. People who don't know you're praying for them were impacted. It came out of the Journal of Reproductive Medicine, and these women were trying to get pregnant and could not. So at Columbia University, they set a control group who wasn't going to be prayed for, and a regular group, another group who was going to be prayed for. 50% of the prayed for group became pregnant, while only 26% of the non-prayer prayed for group. Now, these are medicines, so they were still using all their medicine, all their physical things they do to help a woman get pregnant, but the prayer affected the prayer group dramatically, and the women didn't even know they were being prayed for. That's pretty powerful. If you go back up here to AIDS patients, they had distant healing prayer in a double blind again at the California Pacific Medical Center, and the survival rate, the recovery rate, was improved by the group being prayed for. And you jump back up here to San Francisco General Hospital now. Coronary care patients who were prayed for had significantly less congested heart failure, fewer cardiopulmonary arrest, used fewer antibiotics and diuretics, and had less pneumonia. And this is just a bunch of doctors, scientific people using double-blind studies and showing you those people getting prayed for, whether they knew it or not, had a better outcome than those not. So clearly, you've got a power here. And of course, you all know Larry Dawsey wrote all those books back there a while back. And Allison, you've been trying to get Larry here, and it's hard to do. He's so popular. But he points out that thoughts and intentions really influence it. And here's how he explains it using a little different lingo than Edgar uses. Humanity becomes more aware of the universal mind, a term Cayce uses, which is a non-local mind that is infinite and immortal. The universal mind is immortal and infinite, in which we all have our existence. So there is a collective consciousness. So what you think affects others, what they think affects you. Then healing will become more common, and, quote, we could become a kinder, gentler culture, end quote. Any prayerful intention and thought from one local mind to another has an impact on that other because we are connected. Non-local mind leads to what he calls, quote, the golden rule of A.R.E. of medicine and healing. Quote again, do unto others because they are you. That is real hard. I mean, the first time people started saying to me that what you see in others is what's in you, it's no way. That can't be. Why? Because non-local mind is unlimited and boundless. So in other words, even though I'm up here in this separate body from your body, our minds are at some level connected. And what you're thinking of me right now is affecting me. And what I'm thinking of you affects you. So in your relationships at work or at home in a family or in your friendships, keep that in mind as you start thinking while they're talking, which is something we usually do. We don't listen very well. We're just thinking of what we're thinking. If your thoughts drift towards the negative, Larry Dawsey is saying you are influencing it that way. If your thoughts stay toward the positive, even if you see them move to the negative, you bring them back to the positive, you are adding to the collective in a very positive way. Which means that minds can't be walled off from each other. I know you think your thoughts are your own, but Gladys Davis Turner told me some Monday morning she would sneak into her office the back way because if you walked by Edgar, he knew exactly what you had been doing and thinking. And she said, sometimes it was none of his business. Edgar Cayce not only knew what you were thinking, and he's a prototype of you and me. He's a prototype of you and me. His mind could pick up any thoughts that were going on. He could actually see your aura, and while you were talking with him, he could tell you were exaggerating. The fish was this big, Edgar, and your aura would shift to this limey yellow color, and he knew probably this big. You see? He could actually receive a dream from a guy in the Midwest who only remembered part of the dream. He could tell them the whole dream, and the guy in the Midwest did not understand the dream, and Edgar could tell them exactly what the dream meant. The biggest example you've heard of is the spider up the sleeve dream, right? Many of this guy from the Midwest sends Edgar Cayce a letter about a dream he had, and he had worked with his study group, and they had given their ideas about what the dream was, but basically he's walking to his house, and he feels something up his sleeve. So he shakes it, and out drops a black spider who walks into the house and builds a web. He goes in the house, sweeps the spider and the web out the back door, smashing it as best he can, closes the door, and he hears scurrying all over the house. And every piece of that spider builds a web around the house. So he goes to the study group, and they say, listen, Bob, I think you better clean your closet out. There's a spider in there or something. You got spiders in your house. You need to do some house cleaning. He mails it to Edgar Cayce. Thousands of miles away, Edgar goes into his deep attunement to the universal mind, non-local mind, and says, if you continue with the affair you're having and think you can keep it up your sleeve, it will get out and into your house, and another free will being will make a decision about this. Now, you're clever and witty, and you'll sweep that out the back door, but you live in the house her father owns. And all those webs will be affected when Dad hears about what you've been doing to his sweet daughter. So then Gladys told me that he yelled so loud, she typed the words in all caps with an exclamation point. warning, warning, warning. And she mailed that bugger back to him. Now, can you imagine the study group? What did Edgar say, Bob? Do you see how connected the minds are? Here's a Cayce reading that's helpful with this. Thy prayers ascend to the throne of God, and the angel of each entity, there's your guardian angel, you have one, each entity stands before the throne to make intercession. Not as a physical throne, no, but that consciousness in which we may be so attuned that we become one with the whole in lending prayer and strength to each entity for whom you speak and pray. Isn't that amazing? If this is real, and we've come to believe he was pretty good, this is a powerful directive that if we could only shake off our doubt and our physical paradigm views, this would be powerful stuff. Now, here are some of the mechanics. We love mechanics. Here are some of the mechanics of prayer, and Edgar said you would find them in the scriptures. And here are just 4. The kingdom of God is within you, from Luke. Now, that's really hard for a physical person, you know. There's nothing in here but blood and guts and bones and my little mind. And yet he's saying if you work at it, and so is Larry Dawsey saying, you will actually get beyond your local mind to your non-local mind, which is connected to the universal consciousness or the mind of God. Number 2, when Jesus does this strange little tale in Matthew, when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. Now, for a physical person to go into a closet and sit down and close the door, somewhere in this room is a secret Father, a heavenly Father that's secret. And this energy or mind hears in secret. This is very hard stuff for three-dimensional reality. Then Elijah searches for God in the earthquake, in the lightning, in thunder, all the things that Hollywood considers to project as God's presence, and he can't find God. So he says he pulled the mantle of his cape up around himself and backed up to the mouth of the cave, and he heard a still small voice, and there was God. So within himself, he hears a still small voice. Now, if you want to experience this, try to comprehend what a still voice sounds like. And that'll help you get into it. That is deep meditation, understanding a still small voice. And then, of course, in Proverbs, it is clearly said, as a person thinks, so is he or she. There you go again with thoughts are things. Edgar's teaching, thoughts are things. They're as real as a pin in the hand or a stick in the eye. And that'll keep your thoughts down when you're starting to project a negative thought about someone. And I know how hard that work is. The other last thing we can touch on is you got to stay centered in the midst of the turmoil, in the midst of the storm. If you let yourself get lost in that river of craziness and turmoil that goes on in the earth, you're in the flow, you're sucked up. Yes, now you're all lost, and it's very difficult. Your heart's broken. Every time you turn on the TV, you're depressed. But if you can stay centered, and out of The Secret of the Golden Flower, Richard Wilhelm and Carl Jung have this wonderful diagram called Your Center in the Midst of Conditions. And if you look at that logo there, that diagram, there's a lot of stuff going around you. You know, you're a worker, you're a friend, you're a daughter or son, you're a husband or wife, you're a parent. All these things, and they have multi-dimensional influences on you, but you have to stay centered. So you must do that. You must build some shields. You must subdue your outer self's crazy yelling and panic running. The sky is falling, the sky is falling. Chicken Little, some of you remember that? If you can stay centered, you will be able to tap into the universal, non-local mind and the emotional input that some of the news and other people project on you, or anxiety they try to stir or already have within themselves. You have to stay centered if you're really going to make a difference. So, indeed, we can save the world. There are powerful evidences that we have the power within us. The influence of thought on water crystallization, the influence of prayer on people who don't even know they're being prayed for, proven scientific double-blind studies. For those of you who are thinking I'm blue skying this, I am not. And then staying centered. Don't let yourself get thrown out into the whirlwind of this world, but try to go through the events centered. And anytime you feel yourself getting a little wacky, start the prayer, start the thoughts, watch your thoughts, observe your thoughts, recenter yourself. And then start to be a channel of such things to the world, starting in your little world around you, your work world, your home world right around you, your world of your own thoughts, and then project it all the way out to the universe and to this planet here. Okay, that's it.
In 1967, my mother gave me a copy of Jess Stern's classic, The Sleeping Prophet, and said, "I think you'd be interested in this," and that was an understatement. I was totally fascinated and have been interested and involved in the Cayce work since then.
I first discovered the Edgar Cayce readings when I was in my early 20s. I was in college. I had just been diagnosed with a rather serious condition, and I was feeling very hopeless. Searching. I had rejected my childhood religion and nothing seemed to be working, and I desperately wanted to believe in something, and then someone gave me a book about Edgar Cayce, and it was just so wonderful to believe.
I first discovered the Edgar Cayce readings in the 1970s when I read the book There is a River by Thomas Shigrew, and it changed my life.
When I was a little kid, they told me the story of him sleeping on his books, and I thought, wow, that is really cool. So I tried it. It was so uncomfortable I couldn't go to sleep. So I just had to memorize what I needed to know for school. But it was always, the readings, Edgar Cayce was always like in the background of my life.
I first discovered the Edgar Cayce readings when I was seeking healing for rheumatoid arthritis.
I was 23. It was 1943. And my husband and I came to work with the Cayces. And one day he came into the little office where I was typing, and he said, "June, would you like to have a reading?" Well, by this time, There Is a River and an article in Coronet magazine had brought in so many requests for readings that Gladys had scheduled them 2 years in advance. And the letters were still in piles all around the entrance hall. And so I said, "Mr. Cayce, I can't have a reading," because I'd opened some of those letters and seen the pain in them. And, you know, "Can you find my son who's lost in action?" This was World War II. "Can you help my daughter who's dying of cancer?" And on and on and on. And he said, "June, we give readings for everybody on the staff."
From the woman who became my wife. She dragged me kicking and screaming into the Cayce material. I just didn't believe it.
I just had a feeling there was something on that shelf for me. I asked them to wait quietly by the checkout stand and walked over and started looking at the titles on the shelf in religious and metaphysical area. And suddenly I thought someone from the other side of the stack had pushed a book in too far because a book fell out into my hands.
I was a teenager, and I remember reading it and saying, "This is all true, and I've known this forever." All the things that Cayce, that came through Cayce about the soul's journey, reincarnation, the oneness of everything, it just made so much sense to me.
Through my wife's father. It was one of our first dates. I was a pre-med student. I showed up for the date. He came out to introduce himself and said, "Oh, Greg, I understand you're going to be a doctor." I said, "Yes." He said, "I'm reading a very interesting book about this man they called the sleeping doctor. He used to go to sleep and then he could diagnose patients and he would recommend treatments. His name is Edgar Cayce. Have you ever heard of him?"
So I went up with my friend to the Glad Helpers prayer group, and that is the instant that changed my life. That's the reason I live in Virginia Beach now. I'm a member of Glad Helpers prayer group. I sat in one of the chairs and received laying on of hands and heard the most beautiful message in my ear that reached right to my soul and changed my life.
Just love the whole scene and am grateful for it. It's helped me to deal with understanding and trying to be patient with difficulties, challenges, tragedies in life and such, and keep me sane.
It changed the way I dealt in all my relationships from that time forward, and the way I viewed the world and the way I viewed other people.
It's had a profound impact on my work, on my family, how I treat my wife, how I treat a greater family. So the impact's been significant.
The source of the information that came through those mental and spiritual readings just gave me the hope and the light that I needed.
I would not be here had it not been for many of the people that were in A.R.E. before me.
That reading was so perfect, so right on. It just redirected my whole life.
A.R.E. for inspiration. I use the Cayce readings for health, mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional. And I love going to their conferences.
The Cayce work has evolved.
This is a work that would influence even unborn souls. Yeah.
The legacy of Edgar Cayce and A.R.E. is really, to me, the base that we should all have to understand what connection every one of us have with nature, with other people in the world, and with the spirit world.
I have a son, I have a grandbaby, and I want this work to be there for them. So I support the Cayce work.
I mean, I just feel so blessed that I have this material, and I want it to be here for my daughter, for future generations.
It's been wonderful to have this information and to be a little on the periphery of the work going on.
More than that, I think the world really, really needs the message of spirit, of love and reconciliation that the Cayce work and the spirit in the Cayce work points to.
It's the A.R.E. staff, A.R.E. members, it's all a big family.
I just love Kevin. I think he's doing a good job. I think everybody on the staff is working hard and giving what they have, you know, with a good spirit too.
This work couldn't carry on if the staff wasn't there doing it. I'm very proud of the organization and how far they've come and what they do today.
I just think they do a terrific job, you know, and I know it has to be hard work.
As you get into the A.R.E. organization, as you get deeply involved in the Cayce work, you realize that this truly is a team effort. It's a family.
Thank you.
Thank you. I love you very much.
The first publicity was really the New York Times in 1910. They ran a full-page spread about the illiterate man who became a doctor when hypnotized. He wasn't illiterate, but that was a better headline. But it was an amazing ability to somehow tune into someone at a distance. I would say that for many years he had essentially 2 readings a day, one in the morning and one in the afternoon.
The building itself is located at Virginia Beach, Virginia, on a beautiful hillside that stretches back from the Ocean Boulevard. It commands an unobstructed view of the ocean from Cape Henry in the entrance of Chesapeake Bay on the north and Virginia Beach on the south. The front looks out upon a flower-studded terrace of green, beyond which the broad expanse of the Atlantic may be seen. From the quiet restfulness of the wide verandas, an ever-changing panorama is presented in the distance. Battleships, schooners, pleasure yachts, freighters of every kind and from every port. The surrounding country is ideally suited for such an institution and such an important scientific experiment as our investigators seek to make in this hospital.
Edgar Cayce founded the A.R.E. in 1931 really as a membership/research organization where people could come and see what this material was all about. It wasn't really until 1942 when his biography, There Is a River, came out. It was really his life story. And people bought that book and became very interested. And then the following year, 1943, Coronet magazine published an article called The Miracle Man of Virginia Beach. And Coronet was really the life magazine of its day. And because of those 2 publications, the requests for reading became so frequent that Edgar Cayce told his secretary to book in advance in order to stay kept up with the demand. He was really worried about all these people. The postman was apparently delivering bags of mail each day. Eventually, Edgar Cayce wore himself out and had a stroke. And when he died, he had been booked 8 readings a day, 2 years in advance. So truly toward the end of his life, people realized that his gift was remarkable, and so many people wanted help.
The building opened to the public in 1975, but the journey to build it started years earlier. In the early 1960s, it became apparent that the A.R.E. was running out of space in the Cayce Hospital building, which it had moved to fairly recently in 1956. The library's book collection had already outgrown the space, with hundreds of books now having to be stored in the basement. Staff offices were getting cramped despite the addition of the Wynn Press building to campus in 1962. The Cayce Hospital's structural integrity was in question. The pipes were rotting in the walls, wrote Hughlin Cayce in a letter. Staff formed a building committee to look at their options. Levitt Associates of Norfolk submitted a proposal in 1966 for design made of circles and curvilinear shapes, covered in white stucco and plaster. According to the architects, quote, by its plastic form, the design of the building suggests the flexibility that man must possess in his pursuit of enlightenment.
have the Cayce Archives School of Massage that trains people in massage therapy. I believe we've graduated about 2,100 different students from 18 different countries.
Today, the A.R.E. community has grown to tens of thousands of members around the world with regional offices and programs that include international outreach, conferences, and educational activities reaching nearly 1 million people worldwide. Recent projects, such as remodeling the meditation room and total reconstruction of the A.R.E.'s retaining wall, will help to revitalize the A.R.E. and propel the organization into the future.
Well, good evening, everyone. So, you might have heard about the news today in Washington, D.C., and out of respect for those events, we decided to postpone this evening's webinar. So, Edgar Cayce's Secret Tips to Bring You a Healthy New Year will be rescheduled as soon as possible. And so tonight, I would encourage all of you to take some time to pray and meditate for peace and healing within all of us, within the country, within the world. And certainly with regards to the things that we can do, it certainly begins with overcoming our own fear and anxieties. And there's certainly a lot offered throughout the Edgar Cayce material, and taking time every day to meditate and really focus within ourselves, because ultimately all healing always occurs from within. And so this evening, I would encourage you to maybe spend a little bit less time watching the news, or none at all, and reach out to your friends, your family, and your loved ones, and let them know how much you love them, how much you care for them. Go out of your way to be kind to anyone, strangers and all, and pray for everyone that was involved today. And certainly pray for those that were injured and those that lost their lives. So the most important thing that we can do is look in our own lives and how we can manifest this love, how we can manifest this peace in all of our actions with everyone that we encounter. So there's many good meditations out there if you want to cultivate some peace for you this evening. A simple one is just finding a nice, comfortable place and just focus on your breath. Or perhaps take some time and do something that makes you laugh. Perhaps even reach out and help someone. And do through your actions things that are going to make this world a better place simply because you have lived in it. And the one thing that we certainly can always do is cooperate. We can always be a little bit nicer to each other, right? And so out of respect for these events, we're going to postpone our health webinar. And I'll let you know as soon as we have the dates up. But tonight, let's all cultivate some peace. Let's cultivate some respect and love for one another. And let's look to how we can cooperate and make this country, make this world a better place. Remember, my friends, all healing is from within. All right, peace be with you. Have a good night. I'll see you soon.
Edgar Cayce's A.R.E. also maintains an affiliation with Atlantic University, which offers continuing education classes and Master of Arts programs in transpersonal psychology and in leadership studies. The Cayce Riley School of Massage, a leader in holistic education, wellness, and healthcare, and an on-site A.R.E. health center and spa at its Virginia Beach headquarters, where many of the health readings remedies are offered in the renovated historic hospital. The ARE is a membership-based organization. ARE members receive exclusive benefits that include a quarterly Body, Mind, Spirit magazine, Venture Inward, and the Cayce Quarterly newsletter, plus exclusive access to the entire set of Edgar Cayce's 14,306 documented readings in an online searchable database, and much more.